I cut 21 minutes off my marathon time in just 7 months. And that was with an all-out race effort in both. In September 2025, I raced the Berlin Marathon and it was my first ever experience of a full-on bonk hitting the wall and it going terribly. I crossed the line in 3 hours and 5 minutes, and fast forward to London Marathon just this weekend, and I crossed the line in 2 hours and 44 minutes, cutting over 20 minutes off my time. In this video, we'll analyze the 2 training blocks, what I did differently this time, and why I believe I was much fitter during this prep. Let's get into it. Now, before we do so, there are some things that I tweaked that went better that are not to do with my fitness, such as my fueling. This time I took the Cadence gels, which have electrolytes in, that sat really well in my stomach. I practiced them throughout all my training block, and I'm someone that sweats a lot. I've always been that guy. I lose a lot of sodium, so they need to be replenished. So rather than carrying electrolytes on the course, I carried these Cadence gels and they seem to work well. And it's the first time ever out of the 4 marathons I've done that I did not cramp. The second thing is pacing according to your fitness. I still could have hit the wall in the London Marathon if I'd gone out too quickly, but this time I took a conservative approach. For the first time ever, I negative split the marathon, running the first half in 1 hour 23 minutes and the second half in 1 hour 21. I've never felt so good at that 30-kilometer mark, and that's not only because of my fitness and the prep going well, but also I was very, very patient. But now into the exciting stuff, so you can figure out what you can do in your next marathon prep so that you run a faster time and knock off minutes off your marathon. What we're gonna do is we're gonna look into the hard data. So it's not just off opinion, we cannot argue this, and we're gonna see like for like what I did differently. So interestingly, the 2 things that were very similar were my peak mileage in the Berlin prep was 114 kilometers, and the peak mileage in my London Marathon prep was 113 kilometers, so not too different. The other thing that literally happened by accident was analyzing the 2 12-week blocks. I ran a total of 62 days in both Berlin Marathon prep and 62 days in the London Marathon prep, so nothing different there. One thing that did edge towards the London Marathon prep was volume. So I averaged 10.9 kilometers for the London Marathon prep per day. That's including the rest days, including the 0-kilometer days, and 10.5 kilometers for the Berlin prep per day. Again, not wildly different, but London takes the win on that one. The next one is probably the biggest and I think the most interesting point, and that was that I actually did more long runs past the 28-kilometer mark for the Berlin prep than I did for the London Marathon prep. Here's the figures. So for Berlin Marathon, I did 6 runs in the 12-week block over 28 kilometers. For London, I only totaled 4, with 2 of those runs in the Berlin Marathon prep over 32 kilometers, with only 1 in the London Marathon over 32 kilometers, which just shows you a lot of people will prioritize their long run. It does matter, yes, but not as much as you think. It's not about just going as close to the marathon distance as you can, but really improving your overall fitness, your threshold workouts, your tempo workouts, all that speed that then translates up to the marathon distance. So you get better through smarter overall structure, not just banking more volume, banking more long runs, thinking I have to run basically a full marathon before doing so. That is a recipe for disaster. Reason being is that you're just gonna be far too cooked, far too fatigued when you get on the start line, and you're not gonna run your fastest time. The next interesting point was that my easy runs during the London Marathon block was way more disciplined. I averaged for my easy runs during Berlin a 4 minutes 50 per kilometer pace. I'll put the mile pace on the screen here too. Whereas my London was 5 minutes 18 per kilometer. So for my Berlin Marathon prep, my heart rate averaged 139.7 beats per minute. And my London Marathon, my average heart rate during these easy runs at a much slower pace was 134.7 beats per minute, which does show you easy days do matter. There's of course a lot of hype about Zone 2 training on the internet, and yes, it is important, but my next question would be, is how easy is that Zone 2? Are you at the top end? Are you at the bottom end? And this prep, I really made sure I was on the top end of Zone 1, bottom of Zone 2 throughout my easy days. It meant that my legs were fresher, and to be honest, I never really felt too fatigued throughout the entire prep. I could always attack the sessions with quality. I remember it wasn't affecting my sleep too much, and overall I felt like at the end of the marathon block I could do it again. I remember after Berlin I was down and out, ready to go back to the drawing board and figure out what went so badly. The next thing was the key sessions that were different in London versus Berlin prep. I'll put the key session total distances that I ran and the average pace for London here. As you can see, a real standout workout for me was the 20-mile race that I did, which was an average of 3:42 per kilometer for 32.2 kilometers, an average heart rate of 164. That's when I knew my fitness was heading in the right direction. That leads on to my next point, was that during this London Marathon block, because I have the privilege of living in London, I raced so much. There's a race every weekend here if you want it. You can do park run. But during the Berlin Marathon prep, I was back home in Jersey, Channel Islands, staying with my parents, which meant there were no races, no tune-up events in the build-up to the actual marathon. Of course, during races, you push so much harder when there's other runners around you. You're way more motivated. You can just get that little bit more out of yourself. And when I compare my long run to the London Marathon prep versus Berlin, they were much more specific and targeted to the marathon. Berlin were very long, easy long runs, whereas the London Marathon prep were very specific, harder paces, marathon effort workouts, something that I know my body responds to very well. And finally, when we compared the most important element to training, which is total volume. This edged towards the winner being the London Marathon prep, and I believe that's because of my easy days being a lot slower. It meant that I could bank more total volume throughout the week, I wasn't skipping sessions, and I was actually able to stay consistent. For the Berlin Marathon prep, my weekly median in kilometers was 77.9, and for London, my weekly median in kilometers was 88.2. So while the peak was very similar, this did not matter. At the end of the day, it comes to the mileage that you can stay consistent with for that full 12 to 16 week marathon block. It's about that perfect line in the Strava graph with small dips to absorb the training rather than huge spikes and then coming back down. I responded way better to this. And because of the total mileage being higher in London versus Berlin, my long runs made up a much smaller proportion of my total weekly volume. So marathon long runs above 28 kilometers totaled 121.8 kilometers for London and 188.5 kilometers for Berlin, giving a percentage of total volume for the full block at 19.4% for Berlin and only 11.8% of London. It just shows you cannot just not train all week and bank on that long run. Every session is important. Consistency is so important. So the final summary, comparing my 2:44 London Marathon block versus my 3:05 Berlin Marathon block, was this. The difference wasn't that I was suddenly doing crazy mileage or peaking out way higher than I did before. The difference was that the whole block was stronger. You have to remember that the work you put in must be absorbed by your body. So sometimes if you work too hard and you cook yourself too hard, you have to take more rest days, more time out, and you're not able to stay consistent for the full block. The London Marathon prep was much more balanced, more relaxed. I felt like I was really taking it easy. I felt like I was really slowing down intentionally my easy runs, keeping in upper zone 1, lower zone 2 on those days, pushing really hard on my more difficult sessions, and of course racing a lot more. So I pushed when it really counted. For London, I did of course run more total volume, which does help, but it genuinely didn't feel like it. I wasn't aware that I was running so much more. The total exhaustion or effort throughout the week felt fairly similar. A much bigger percentage of my total volume was ran easy in London versus Berlin. I was probably ego running too much in Berlin, pushing up that easy pace, running a little bit too fast, and a lot of my training volume was probably in that 150 to 160 BPM heart rate zone, whereas I respond much better to that big polarization, training hard and keeping it super chill. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed looking at the hard data of the 2 blocks. I'm keen to learn from this and apply it into the next one so I can run even faster. So yes, pacing mattered, the fueling mattered on the day, but overall I felt like coming into London Marathon a lot fitter because the training block was smart. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to click subscribe to support the channel. I'll be making a lot more videos like this, documenting the journey with hopefully many more marathons in the future.